Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? It's your boy, The Doc, and we're back for another week of training camp injury updates. I also go through every single depth chart that got released this week, tell you about some news and notes that I think you guys will think is important, and I answer a few questions at the end of this video so that we can get some more interaction. Make sure you leave the comments down below. You might have your question answered in a video next week, but let's get into it. All of the training camp injury updates that you need to know about for your fantasy teams. All right, let's get into these injury updates. First up, we got Christian McCaffrey. He's in with a calf strain and is expected to miss the entire preseason, but only a few weeks of actual practice. The real question is, how much of the preseason did they really expect Christian McCaffrey to play in? Week 1's just 4 weeks away. The average time to return from a calf injury for an NFL player is about 13 days, but that number isn't specific to running backs in particular. So we know that sometimes with running backs and wide receivers, calf injuries can be a lot worse from a recovery timeline. The good news is that we have that time right now. The bad news is that you'll be drafting Christian McCaffrey probably without much of an injury update. To me, this is something that it really comes down to how much risk are you willing to take with a guy like Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, if he's healthy, he is worth the #1 overall pick. Me personally, if I have a top 2 pick, I'm probably going to use this as a tiebreaker and go with someone else like a Tyreek Hill or maybe a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or a Breece Hall, even if you want to go running back. I'm not really faulting anyone for taking Christian McCaffrey this early in a draft, but just know that he is already banged up. And calf injuries, and I'm not putting this out there lightly, calf injuries do tend to be precursors to bigger injuries down the road. So we're hoping that doesn't happen in this case because he's got the month off, but just know that that is something that could potentially happen if you draft Christian McCaffrey. You're assuming a lot of risk with all of the unknowns that we have right now. Now, in a couple weeks, that could change, but for right now, a lot of risk with drafting Christian McCaffrey. Next up, we're going to talk about Justin Herbert. He has a partial plantar fascia tear, expected to miss the next 2 weeks of practice, and this injury actually happened last week, so we're only looking at about 1 or 2 more weeks without him. Based on the timeline, this is likely just a partial tear. They didn't actually specify that, but I'm making an educated guess based on the timeline. I took some time to look back at 3 other quarterbacks that we've seen with this type of injury in the past. I'm going to throw some stats up on the screen. Feel free to look at that, but I'm just going to talk about them real quick. Eli Manning completely tore his plantar fascia in week 4 of the 2009 season. He actually saw dips in both yards per game and fantasy points per game in the 12 games after the injury, but did play the entire season, so that's important to note. Drew Brees had a complete tear in 2015. Again, both of those injuries worse than what Justin Herbert is dealing with, but Brees actually played better in the 2 games after his tear compared to the 13 games prior from a yards per game and fantasy points per game perspective, so didn't really affect his performance at all. And then Peyton Manning had a partial tear in week 8 of the same season and saw considerable dips in his production afterwards, but he played in week 9, the week after his injury, and it only cost him 6 games, and that was mostly due to an ankle injury that he had in week 9, not the actual plantar fascia tear. So the plantar fascia tear could have led to an ankle injury, but it's more likely that that ankle injury was a totally separate issue, not really something that was contributing to his lackluster performance to end that season, even though he did technically win a Super Bowl that year. So what did we learn from looking at those 3 guys? Basically, from an availability standpoint, I'm not really that worried about Justin Herbert's foot or plantar fascia injury. I don't think that it's going to cause him to miss any time. All 3 of those quarterbacks actually played the very next week after their injuries. Even though they had them, it's a pain tolerance issue. It's not usually something that stops guys from playing. Justin Herbert has a full month to recover. This isn't something that I'm really worrying about or letting affect how I draft a guy like Justin Herbert. If you really loved him, you're probably still okay drafting him wherever you wanted to draft him before. All right, the next 2 wide receivers that we're going to be talking about. First up, we got DeAndre Hopkins with the Titans. He has a knee injury that's expected to keep him out for the next 4 to 6 weeks. This could be a low-grade ligament sprain, but it also could be a meniscus injury. Either way, the team team is optimistic that he'll be able to return prior to week 1, and he's not going to need surgery on this. So if it is something, it's probably pretty minor. Again, I'm probably not drafting DeAndre Hopkins personally, but if you like DeAndre Hopkins, I'm not letting this news affect my draft position of him. I'm probably looking for a little bit of an injury discount since he's missing the whole preseason, but if you love him, you're probably drafting him either way. Next up, we got Puka Nacua. He's dealing with a knee bursa injury. He's expected to miss a couple of weeks of practice. Coach Sean McVay said that he's dealing with this bursa injury. He said that it burst. It's hard to say for sure, but most likely it's a bursitis or an inflammation of the knee bursa. Even if it burst, it's not really something that we're crazy concerned about medically. A bursa is just a fluid-filled sac that provides cushion and a gliding surface to a joint, specifically right over the kneecap. It just allows the kneecap to just move a little bit more smoothly. This isn't really something that I'm reading into a lot, but some people are really heavily investing in Cooper Kupp right now, and they're moving him up the board. I would not personally do that. I liked Cooper Kupp kind of as that lower end wide receiver 2. And I'm also not afraid to take a discount on Puka Nacua if he starts falling into the second round, because this isn't really something that I'm crazy concerned about. All right, last two guys worth mentioning here. Joe Mixon's dealing with a hamstring strain. This was described as minor a few weeks ago, but he has not practiced yet in training camp. Worth paying attention to before your drafts. Is he practicing yet or not? Hamstring strains can be pretty tricky. Even though this one sounds like it's a minor issue, they can really be difficult to rehab, so don't be surprised if he misses more time, but they're probably just giving him most of the preseason off to make sure he's 100% before week 1. I do expect him to play in week 1. And then Josh Downs went down with a ankle injury. He has a high ankle sprain, is expected to miss the rest of the preseason, maybe even into the season. A lot of reps and opportunities coming to rookie Anthony Gould, a guy that really I didn't see a lot of dynasty circles talking about, but he seems to be the guy stepping into Josh Downs' role. And of course, another opportunity here for Michael Pittman Jr. to see a ton of targets. So we're still invested heavily in him as your wide receiver 1 if you skip out on some of the top name guys in the first round. All right, like I said at the beginning of the show, we have the first official depth charts from all 32 teams. I went through them, going to just rattle off some things that I thought were really interesting from the depth charts that I think could be useful for you guys for fantasy. First up, we got Washington quarterback Jaden Daniels being listed as the starter. I think that this was kind of a no-brainer. Jaden Daniels, one of the better options if you want a high upside QB2 for your fantasy squad. I'm looking at Jaden Daniels. I think he could do a lot with his legs this year, and we know that's a cheat code from a quarterback perspective. And then Minnesota quarterback Sam Darnold is expected to start for the Vikings. J.J. McCarthy listed as the backup right now. I don't think, from looking at the training camp reports, that J.J. McCarthy's ready to start. Doesn't sound like he quite has a full grasp of the offense. I think they want to give him a year. And if Sam Darnold is competent, I mean, we've never seen him be competent, but if he is, I think that he will start for the majority of this season. J.J. McCarthy, not really someone I'm looking to draft unless something happens to Sam Darnold. Next up, I got two interesting rookie wide receivers. One I expected, one I didn't expect. Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jacksonville Jaguars, already being listed as a starter. The team's choosing not to run him a ton downfield. I think the team is just opting not to run anyone on deep routes to start the year. I think they're trying to avoid soft tissue injuries, hamstring pulls, things like that. And so Brian Thomas Jr. hasn't flashed a ton, but when they give him opportunities, he is showing to have a great rapport with Trevor Lawrence. He's already being listed as a starter alongside Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk. Kind of expected that one. The one I didn't expect was Tampa Bay third-round pick Jalen McMillan being listed as a starter and already getting huge praise from Baker Mayfield and the rest of the offense and defense. Jalen McMillan looks like a guy that's going to fit right in. Didn't have a lot of buzz in dynasty drafts, but he seems like a pretty reasonable fit looking at his skill set to replace either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin if either guy got hurt. So again, probably not someone I'm spending a ton of draft capital on, but I'm keeping an eye on kind of what happens down there in terms of the splits for him. Jalen McMillan could be a guy that in best ball is worth kind of stacking up if you took a Godwin or Mike Evans as maybe an insurance policy. And it does seem like he's going to be starting and getting a ton of reps from week 1 on. Last few interesting tidbits here. Cincinnati running back Chase Brown currently being listed as the RB2, but getting a lot of reps with the ones right now in Cincinnati. I think there's a chance that Chase Brown could win the starting job before the end of preseason. He's taking a ton of reps right now in camp, and he's shown that he can be a bell cow in college. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a decent pass blocking back that Chase Brown could be a 3-down starter, someone I'm looking at as a possible RB3 for my team. If I go wide receiver heavy, especially to start my drafts, I'm looking for Chase Brown later on in the middle rounds, probably closer, anything after round like 10 or 11. I want a little bit of Chase Brown on my rosters. Baltimore running back Justice Hill does seem to have an edge on the currently injured and recovering Keaton Mitchell coming back from that ACL tear. Justice Hill getting a lot of love from the team, listed as the RB2 on the depth chart behind Derrick Henry, a good handcuff if you don't trust Derrick Henry, already over the age of 30, to be a bell cow all year. Justice Hill seems to be the first in line to get third down back role as well as the backup to Derrick Henry for the Ravens. And then Las Vegas rookie tight end Brock Bowers is being used all over the place. He's being listed as the tight end 1 for the offense. He's probably the second option on this team from a pass catching perspective. And I think he's just someone that if you don't get a top tight end, Brock Bowers seems to be positioning himself to be one of the better rookie tight ends that we've seen in a long time. We saw Sam Laporta do it last year. I think Brock Bowers is as good as Sam Laporta. Maybe not quite as dynamic, but he is a solid football player. Definitely don't be afraid to draft a rookie tight end if his name is Brock Bowers. All right, guys, finally, we have a few questions that you guys left on last week's video. Make sure if you get a chance, like this video, subscribe to the channel. We're trying to be as interactive as we can down in the comments. Leave a comment. If I don't answer in a video, I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can in the comments section. So keep a lookout. If I don't answer your question, there's probably a good chance that it's going to be in a future video. But I did get some great questions on last week's video. First up, we got, I'm going to say it's Reeb, but it could be Ribbe, 8788. Hey, Doc, what do you consider to be a high risk for injury? Missing games consistently or being hurt in general and playing through it? So this is a great question. I personally don't believe in injury risk outside of injury history. So the way I look at it, certain injuries are more likely to cause future issues, more likely to reoccur than other injuries. And so I like to look at players' injury history. I don't care how many games they've missed. What we know statistically, looking at the data, players that get hurt often in high school and college tend to be hurt often in the NFL. Players that have long injury histories tend to keep getting hurt as they play in the NFL. So for me, high injury risk is all about what has their history told us about their ability to stay healthy, and then I analyze the specific injuries in that history. I do a lot of that in our draft guide. If you get a chance, go to the Fantasy Headliners draftguide.com. Go and order that because I put injury risks on all of the players that I do profiles on that are coming off of injury. So you can see how risky I think an individual player is on my scale of 0 to 10. It's really easy. And if they rank a certain way based on the scale, they're at a high risk. And so that's how I personally evaluate it. It's all based on that injury history because it's the best predictor that we have for future injury. Great question from Ribbe. Next up, we got Rob B5915. What's your take on Rodgers for this season? Would you take him as a quarterback too? I think you kind of have to based on where he's going in drafts right now. Me personally, I don't draft players coming off Achilles injuries, hardly ever. I'm just going to let someone else take that risk. I don't think that Rodgers is going to be lacking for weapons. I think the team could be decent. I guess there's a chance. I just am very suspicious of all last season. He tried to come back and kept saying, I'm coming back, I'm coming back, I'm coming back, I'm going to make it. And then now all of a sudden he's not healthy enough to play in the preseason. Just seems kind of suspicious to me. I just don't really trust Aaron Rodgers to come back from this injury, just like I don't trust really any player to come back from an Achilles injury. I don't think that you're getting the Rodgers that you think you're getting when you take him. I could be wrong. Maybe he will defy all the odds. I think he's over 40 now. So again, if that's something you're willing to bet on, go ahead. But I'm going to probably pick a younger option that has a little bit more upside from a health perspective. Last up, we got Tom Bennett, 4159. J.K. Dobbins is splitting first-team reps, but I keep hearing pundits say that Achilles tears are the death nail to running backs and that he would be a high-risk pick for fantasy managers. Any word on how he's progressing? Progressing, I think that he's playing and healthy. I'll just talk a little bit about the death nail to running backs. I mean, if you can find me really good running backs that have come back from an Achilles injury and been super productive from a fantasy perspective, like by all means, compare them to J.K. Dobbins. I have not seen any of that, and I've been doing this for almost a decade now. So from my personal opinion, I don't draft guys coming off of Achilles. I've said that with Rodgers. I'm saying again for sure with Dobbins. Even if you're going to get him for free, the opportunity cost, I'd rather have a high-end backup. I'd rather have a guy that, you know, is coming into the season healthy that doesn't have that type of history. Is he healthy? Yeah. Do you want to take a risk on him? Absolutely. But just know the team only guaranteed him $50,000 when they signed him. So it's not like they have like all of this, confidence that he's going to be able to produce. I know he's getting first team reps, but like, come on, it's Gus Edwards or him. Like there's not a lot of options there. I'm really concerned about the Chargers. Side tangent. I don't know if they're going to be a very good football team this year. I don't like their wide receivers. I don't really like their running back options. I'm not sure how Jim Harbaugh is going to translate from just from a coaching perspective back into the NFL. So I'm just kind of out all the way around on the Chargers, including J.K. Dobbins. But again, the cost is basically nothing. So if you want to be like the Chargers and take a very low cost risk for J.K. Dobbins, like by all means, I'm not going to stop you. All right, guys, that's it. That's all I got for you this week. Sorry, my boy Ted decided he needed to come in here and say hi to the headliners. He thinks he's famous too. But I appreciate you guys liking and commenting on the video. We will see you guys next week.